Sir?
I don't know who this man is.
Drop your weapon. This is your first warning.
Those years. Nothing but lies!
Hi, I'm Tim Weaver from CMVG, and I'm with Andy Kelly from CMVG. Andy,
hello.
You've been playing Binary Domain quite
indeed.
a lot. So tell us about it. It's from Nagoshi, yeah?
Yeah, it's from Toshihiro Nagoshi and his Yakuza studio. This is the first non-Yakuza game they've made in a long time. And it's an attempt by them to sort of appeal to a more Western audience. By which I mean they've made it into a third-person shooter starring some futuristic soldiers. But it's a very decent third-person shooter, and they've done a better job than some established Western devs at making this sort of game.
Yeah. So let's start with the sort of world, the story. You were saying it is a little bit like Blade Runner. It kind of has this sort of like hidden robots are among us kind of
yeah.
vibe to it.
You're part of a group of sort of elite soldiers, as you always are in these games, called a Rust Squad, right. and their job is to sniff out and exterminate hollow children, which are robots that look and act like humans and don't know they're robots. So there is a Blade Runner element, but then instead of using detective skills to hunt these guys down, you're mostly just shooting loads of them in the face. It's a good basis for, the story's really good because the Yakuza games always had a good story, really good cutscenes, and and this is no different. I mean, some of the characters are really like cheesy one-liners. And
yeah, tell us about Big Bo.
Yeah, one of your partners, Big Bo, is this really cliched action hero guy, and he's got the worst one-liners imaginable. But despite the sort of terrible, cheesy characters, the story is really quite compelling, and it gives the action, it gives you something to sort of strive for.
So, I mean, just watching this footage, I mean, people will be thinking, wow, it's got a lot of kind of different elements to it. We saw people sliding down some sort of water chute.
Yeah.
Looks like there's giganto bosses. Looks like there's a bit of Gears of War in there. I mean, is it just a straightforward third-person shooter, or does it mix it up a bit?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the game is kind of typical corridor type third-person shooting, but there are moments quite frequently of variation where you'll be fighting like a giant boss the size of the size of a skyscraper, or you'll be sliding down that water slide thing, or you'll be riding jet skis through a sort of tunnel. So they have attempted to add some variety, but most of the game is spent sort of rolling between cover and shooting robots with big, increasingly powerful weapons.
So what does the actual combat feel like?
It's a really sort of standard third-person shooter control scheme. The cover system's quite responsive and snappy, although it does have that problem of you accidentally turning the corner or jumping over cover when you're trying to get into it. So it doesn't have the sort of precision and polish of, say, Gears of War, but it is very competent, and the enemies these robot guys are seeing can be sort of toyed with. You can shoot their head off and they'll turn on their partners. You can shoot their legs off and they'll sort of crawl towards you. So it's quite dynamic, the combat. But there's not many gimmicks. It's mostly just straightforward action. Yeah.
Tell us about the squad mechanics then. Do you have much influence over where they go, what they do, or is it just a case of they sort of follow you around?
Yeah, well, you can control your squad, and you can tell them to fall back or fire or regroup and stuff. The interesting thing is you can either do it with the control pad by holding down the shoulder button, or you can plug in a headset and speak to them. Right.
So this is the game's big. I guess it's sort of one gimmick is that you can do that.
Yeah, you can command your squad by literally talking to them, and the voice recognition is pretty good, even with various accents. It seems to recognise what you're saying. The problem is the AI of the companions is terrible, and you'll be screaming for help, and they'll be acknowledging you, but they won't be coming, so they'll just stand around whilst you're bleeding out. They rarely do what they're told, or they either mishear you or they just ignore you. So,
I mean, we had a little experiment in the office, and it only seemed to be able to understand you when he spoke in an American accent.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, a few phrases it didn't in the accent you're hearing now, which is a part Scottish, part who knows what. Yeah. It sort of understood most of it, but a few words, like it never understood when I said regroup. Big Bo kept thinking I was just saying his name, and he'd be like, "Hey, what's up, man?" instead of regrouping. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fun game, but it's actually, the game protests when you take the mic out, saying, oh, you know, you're going to lose some of the control, the tactical control, but that's nonsense, because it's quicker and more responsive just to hold the shoulder button and press a command, because it will work every time. Whereas you'd be in the middle of a firefight and you'd be screaming like, for help if you're about to die, and it won't be picking it up, and then those seconds count. So I recommend trying it. For just the experience. It's quite a fun gimmick, but then if you're actually sitting and playing the game, just use the controller. I mean, the bosses are really big in scale, and there's a good mix of just shooting them. You can like jump on their head or using the environment to attack them, and it's quite clever that your squad mates will react to your performance in combat, and you'll get positive and negative points with them, which will affect their opinion of you. So if you do really well or take a boss down quickly, they'll love you. But if you take a while to get through an enemy-controlled area, they'll sort of distrust you. And this all happens in real time as you're playing, so that's a really good innovation as well, I think.
Yeah. So summing up, I mean, what's your sort of overall impression of the game?
Well, I think it's a really good shooter in its own right. It's got a few clever ideas, but I think a general lack of polish, terrible AI, and some really frustrating bits later on sort of hold it back from being a really essential shooter.